this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast with only one host. Actually, to be honest, I'm not even sure if this is going to count as a regular episode. So let me just explain what's about to happen, because it's about to get a little crazy. So, obviously, if you've been following the podcast, you know that this weekend, May 15th, we were going to release our 4th Doctor retrospective with the Krynoid Podcast. Unfortunately, we were going to record today, and Kiyan woke up with a fever. Now, we didn't think it would be right to record it without him, so we've pushed it back for next week. We're going to make it work. We'll get it out next week. It's still happening, but we wanted something to put out there this week, just so that, the fans, I guess, had something to enjoy. So Kiyan's been spending the day thinking, and what's about to happen is back in November of 2014, Kiyan wrote a fan fiction, a very tongue-in-cheek, I should point out, fan fiction starring some of our favorite in-jokes and references from what we had watched up to that point, which would have been near the end of the Second Doctor's era. He called it Lava Pirates, and I am about to embark on a dramatic / humorous / I'm not really sure what's about to happen yet reading of that story. So he's cleaned it up. We've made it all ready for this. It's going to be really interesting. I'm not too certain how well this is going to go, but it's something, right? I don't know. So, here we go. Lava Pirates. It is said that long ago there existed an evil race of machines on the planet Skaro. Angered by the violence and destruction caused by these machines, the gods unleashed their wrath upon the planet. In the wake of the gods' furies, the planet was left covered by a sea of lava, the machines completely wiped out, reduced to nothing more than an ancient myth. However, a special relic was left behind by these ancient machines, a relic unable to be destroyed by even the gods. Seeking fame and glory, treasure hunters from across the universe came to the planet, ushering in a new age of treachery and corruption. And so began the legendary quest for the Dalekenium Orb. "Land ho! Hard port to the starboard stern bow!" yelled Tagana from the crow's nest. It was the first time in days he had seen land. "Caquillion, did you hear me?" he yelled again. "Caquillion!" A robed figure with a grotesque, bug-like face scurried up from below the deck. I'm sorry, Captain Tagana," Caquillion stuttered. He knew any signs of weakness would serve only to annoy his captain further, but he was simply too frightened of Tagana's wrath to keep his composure. I was just in the galley, sir, fixing up that dishwater house that's been acting up recently." He then saluted the good captain, foolishly hoping it would somehow make up for his incompetence. "Nonsense! That darned dishwashing machine hasn't worked in years. Now it would best serve you, Caquillion." Tagana unsheathed his scimitar and licked its bladed edge menacingly. "To do as you're told, and not make up fairy tales when we've finally found what we've been searching for all these years." "What we've been searching for, sir? You don't mean to say—" "Oh, but I do mean to say. I most certainly mean to say." Tagana pointed a finger towards the fast-approaching landmass. "We're finally there! The Dalekenium!" Tagana stepped onto the rock. Landing had taken longer than it should have due to Caquillion's incompetence, but that was usual. What was unusual was the consistency of the rock he had just stepped onto. He couldn't put his finger on what it was exactly, but something about this rock was different from the rock of other volcano islands on Skaro. What could it be? He thought as he waited for Caquillion to finish anchoring the ship. It seemed somehow less stable than... Suddenly there was a deafening crash. "That should do for mooring her up," Tagana heard Caquillion say, as the first mate jumped down onto solid rock. Dagana slowly turned around, dreading what he might see. He inched his head around ever so slowly, but he knew what was awaiting his gaze. The Marco Polo's majestic wooden hull smashed into teeny-tiny bits on unforgiving volcanic rock. "Coquill!" "Wait, Captain," Coquillian interrupted. You don't want to yell at me, sir. Really, you don't. Because I'm sure, sir, that you don't want to blow a fuse and all. At this rate, you will. And remember what your doctor said about how yelling can be very bad for you, sir? There's no use letting it all go to waste when we're finally here, sir. Darn, Dagana's thought. He's right. Can't go pop in a vessel when our goal is so close at hand. So Dagana suppressed his rage and exhaled a long, deep breath into the sulfur air. It's fine, Coquillian. Soon enough we'll have no more need of a ship, for the Dalekenium Orb will be ours. It was a long time coming, and we lost many a good man to the wild deep crimson. Now you and I are the only crew members left, but we made it. Well, what is it, Coquillian? Well, I hate to rain on your parade, Captain, but how do you know we're the first ones here? What if someone else already up and snatched the Dalekenium Orb right from under our nose? Dagana turned to face the volcano looming overhead. No, we are the first ones here. These are uncharted lavas. Nobody thought the legendary Dalekeno would be in the hot, island-bare western heat zone. It was rumored to be all lava sea out here, as far as the eye could see. But we made it, and now the treasure is ours. Right, we found the Dalekeno before any of those other suckers. We were the only ones foolish enough and stupid enough to journey to the western heat zone, and we found it. Sure, whatever. Anyway, once we find the orb, our friends' deaths won't be in vain. Now come on, the legends tell of caverns that run deep into the Dalekeno. Let's find them. Right, sir. They headed off into the not-too-distant distance, where they could see the volcano's incline start to get steeper. But it wasn't long before Dagana dramatically stopped in his tracks. He held up a hand to signal Coquillian to stop too. What was that? Dagana growled under his breath, yet still somehow incredibly noisily. What, Captain? Shh! Can't you hear it? It's coming from... Quick, hide! Nimbly as a pair of drunk rhinoceros, the two dived behind a rock. They peered out of their hiding place towards the lava's edge, not too far away. Look there! See it? Dagana said. He pointed towards the source of the sound. Coquillian's disgusting tentacle jaw dropped when he saw what it was. Not far offshore was anchored a large ship, but not just any large ship, the large ship, the most feared vessel ever to sail the seas of Skaro, the Power Vulcan, and from that vessel smaller boats were coming ashore. As the small boats landed, the pirates inside them came into view. No way! Dagana muttered, astounded. Nobody has ever seen the crew of the Power Vulcan before. Nobody who's come back alive to tell of it, that is. We have to stay hidden. They see us and we're dead men. Wait a minute, Coquillian said. That's... He stood up and came out of hiding. He started slowly jogging over to where the crew of the Power Vulcan was coming ashore. Wait, Coquillian! What are you... Ah, geez, that fool is gonna get me killed. And Dagana came out of hiding as well, and followed him. Janley! Coquillian shouted like an enthused monkey as he quickened his approach towards the most dangerous trio of pirates on the planet. Janley, is that really you? The one called Janley looked at Coquillian disgustedly. It's you, Janley. Wow, never thought I'd see you here. Who is this one? Can we experiment on him? Asked one of Janley's two companions, a mad scientist-looking fellow. Stop being a fool, Zaroff. We're being serious, Janley. Who else would be here? How is it that you know this thing? Whoever companion inquired in a Mexican accent. Salamander, if you know what's good for you... Yes, I'd like to know too, said Dagana, who had caught up with his subordinate. I'd also like to know why you gave away our position, Coquillian. A shiver went up Coquillian's spine. Oh, well, you see, Captain, me and Janley here, we simply knew each other in college. That's all. That's all. We dated for 3 years. In the blink of an eye, Janley had a pistol trained on Coquillian's forehead. Coquillian and Dagana's hands shot skyward. Still don't know when to stop talking, do you? Barked Janley. So you know these jokers, Salamander said condescendingly. Then suddenly his calm facade faded and revealed inner anger. You led them here. I knew we couldn't trust you, added Zaroff. Shut up, you fools. I didn't lead them here. I don't know how they found this place, or if they even know where they are. Neither of them carries any air of particular competence. Quillian, I know for a fact, is a layabout, good-for-nothing fool. I have no idea who the other is. Good, thought Dagana. If only we can convince her we somehow found this place by sheer chance, she might let us... We're here to find the Dalekenium Orb and follow our wildest dreams. Ain't that right, Captain? Shut up, you fool! Shut up! They seek the orb too. I say we harness the power of the Dalekeno and use it against them. Shut up, Zaroff. I can't hear myself think, yelled Janley. Well, if you say you don't know them, muttered Salamander, I will be keeping an eye on you, however. All of you, just shut up. I'm trying to think. Well, don't look now, Zaroff mumbled, but here comes our fourth member. All eyes darted offshore, and everyone saw another small boat approaching. As it came closer, Dagana began to make out who was in it. No way! It can't be. Tears welled up in the corners of Dagana's eyes as the man wearing ancient Mandarin-style clothing came into view. Hey, is that really? Quillian couldn't even speak for his surprise. It is him! The Celestial Toymaker! Dagana exclaimed. Ignoring the pistol still aimed at him and Quillian, Dagana rushed towards the lava to greet the Toymaker. Dagana! I can't believe it! You're alive! The Toymaker cried. I had thought you dead after that incident in the southern straits of hell. And you, replied Dagana. But you should have come looking for us. You old bugger, we survived the raging waters of Mondas together. You should have known I wouldn't have died that easily. Yet I assumed so all the same. What a mistake I have made. A lot happened after that, my friend. I can see that. So you ended up getting in the crew of the Power Vulcan, eh? Yes, as you can see. Just then, the Toymaker noticed Janley's pistol still aimed at Quillian. Janley, lower your weapon. These are my long-lost friends, Captain Dagana and Quillian. Though they also seek the Dalekenium Orb for its power, we can trust them. Trust them? Screamed Janley, now even more enraged than before. We cannot trust them. Everyone who seeks the Dalekenium Orb is an enemy to us. And now it is plain as day that you led us straight into the enemy's hands. But your plan has failed, Toymaker. You overestimated these fools. Salamander, Zaroff, tie up the Toymaker. And the fools. Leave them on the shore. The lava will get to them when the tide comes in. I want this traitorous dog and his friends to die slowly. Obeying, Salamander and Zaroff tied and gagged the three and left them on the almost yet not quite so unbearably hot rock. The intense heat signified only one thing to experienced lava pirates: tide rock. The three captives knew that before long the rough ropes restraining them would be burnt to ash. The only problem was that they'd be in ashes too. Though barely able to move, Dagana managed to crane his neck up towards Janley as the three remaining members of the Power Vulcan were about to make their leave. She looked down at him and smiled a gross, wicked smile, one befitting a terror among pirates such as herself. It was then that Dagana knew the evil and treachery he faced, such evil and treachery as he had never known, even in the world of pirates. And he knew he had only one means to counteract such powerful forces, only one chance if he wanted to claim the Dalekenium Orb for himself and his crew. He would have to fight fire with fire. Suddenly, he almost smiled. He would have, were it not for the gag in his mouth. For evil and treachery, he knew, were what he did best. Dagana stretched his arms. It had taken a while to break free of the ropes and gags, but thanks to Quillian's terrifying maw and its unsuitability to restraint, he and his two companions were now free. And just in time, too, for had they waited any longer, the viciously hot tide would have burnt them alive. Darn that Janley! I knew she would pull something like this one of these days, the Toymaker cursed as he shook a fist in the air. Ready at the drop of a hat to turn her back on those she once called friends. If you knew she would double-cross you, why didn't you double-cross her first? Questioned Dagana. I was going to. Once we found the Dalekenium Orb, Salamander and I had planned to abandon Janely and Zaroff, make a break for it, and get rich ourselves. But now that plan has gone up in smoke. Such is life. Well, we best be off. Janely's crew has a head start on us, and if we plan on finding the Dalekenium Orb before they do, we have to get moving. Right, sir? Saluted Quillian. And I have to say, it's good to have the Toymaker back with us. We only traveled together a short while, Toymaker, but it's great to have such an indispensable comrade back with us, he added with a smile, if you could even say he was capable of smiling. All right, enough with the sentimental garbage, Tagana said. Let's move. The trio moved quietly through the dark caves. It was far hotter than it had been outside, and though they could hardly see where they were going, they all had the sense that they were traveling inward and down slightly into the heart of the volcano. They had lost all sense of time, but it was far too late to turn back. They talked periodically in hushed tones, so as not to disturb the tranquil darkness. Be weary, the Toymaker whispered. I feel we may run into Janely's group any minute now. What makes you say that? Asked Quillian, also under his breath. Just a feeling. All of a sudden, Tagana, who was leading the group, bumped into something. Oof, said the something. What was that? It hissed. The three companions knew just what it was they had stumbled upon. It's Salamander! Tagana gasped in surprise. Though he could only barely make out his surroundings, he didn't feel anyone else's presence. Salamander was alone, and he's by himself. Get him now, yelled Quillian. Right, huh? Tagana screamed in surprise as he felt a warmth on the side of his torso. He realized he had just been stabbed in the side with a dagger. As he keeled over, he heard an equally surprised scream from the Toymaker. His vision started to blur and his hearing fade, but he made out perfectly the figure which came to stand in front of him. A child's play, said Quillian, as he concealed his dagger soaked in the Toymaker's blood. All this time, and you never suspected I was an inside man for the power Vulcan. Let's go, Quillian. Captain Janely is waiting, and these two will soon be dead, Salamander whispered hurriedly. Quillian spun around and gave Salamander a swift, stinging slap across the face. You won't take that tone to the first mate of your ship. Learn your place, maggot. Ahem. But yes, you are correct all the same. We go. Tagana saw the two recede down the dark tunnel as his vision started to go black. Then he vaguely heard the Toymaker's voice. That'll do, the Toymaker said. He rushed to Tagana's side and held out his hand. Suddenly Tagana's vision and hearing snapped back to normal. He felt as good as new. He stood up and reached down to touch his side. He no longer felt the wound that had just been there. In fact, he felt so good that he barely felt anything at all. What did you do, CTM? Tagana asked. Simple. I simply made your wound, and mine, invisible and intangible. Then the Toymaker added under his breath, Of course, I had to erase your entire torso for it to work, but, What was that? Tagana looked down at his own body in the gloom. And though it was dark, he could clearly tell why it was he could no longer feel his wound. In between his legs and chest was a whole lot of nothing. Trying not to think about it, Tagana cleared his throat. Well, we best get going. Now, not only do we have to find the orb, but we have to kill that traitorous swine Quillian as well. Tagana stepped into the circular chamber. Though the room was small, it gave him a sense of freedom after spending hours traversing the maze of caves that had led him here. He had spent the last few hours continuing downward toward the core of the Dalekeno. Somewhere along the way, the walls lit up with brilliant, bright red streaks, flowing veins of magma within the solid outer rock walls, and the darkness gave way to a dim crimson glow. The two hadn't come across the other group at all since Quillian's betrayal, and it seemed to Tagana, as he examined the surroundings, that they hadn't yet reached this place yet. Surveying his surroundings, Tagana noticed another entrance to the chamber exactly opposite the one through which he and the Toymaker had come. But more important than that was the pedestal in the center of the room. Surrounded by 4 glowing red pylons, the pedestal stood tall, and perched on top was a glowing sphere of sparkling silver, the treasure thousands upon thousands had searched for and never found, the Dalekenium Orb. At last, the Toymaker said quietly, as he and Tagana gazed upon the orb in awe. He expected Tigana to say something, but he didn't. Instead, the captain looked solemn as he slowly approached the pedestal and placed a hand upon the orb. But as soon as he did, Janley's crew came rushing into the chamber from the opposite entrance, the guns trained on him. "Stop right there," Janley commanded. She held up her gun in both hands. "Let go of the orb. Put your hands up." Tigana lifted his free hand slowly, but kept his other hand on the orb. He stared at Janley intensely. So intensely. Suddenly his gaze shifted beyond her. He called out, "Now, Salamander! Do it now!" A shot rang out through the chamber and blood seeped from Janley's chest. She fell over, dead. Salamander's bullet had gone straight through her heart. "Good job, Salamander," commented Tigana, as Coquillion slapped the Mexican politician on the back a couple times. "Yes, well, deceiving Janley was simple. She thought she was careful. She thought she was treacherous. She thought she was deceitful, cunning, bah! She didn't know the meaning of the words. It was always easiest to get rid of someone who thinks they're the best around." "Right," agreed Coquillion. "They always think nothing's gonna ever keep them down." Grunted Zaroff. "Well, what's going on here?" stuttered the Toymaker. "I thought Coquillion betrayed us with Salamander and joined Janley's team. Tigana, what's going on?" "You still don't get it. Ha ha ha. Well, I suppose I can tell you now." Tigana stepped towards the Toymaker menacingly, leaving the orb unguarded on the pedestal. His face was lit by the bloody red of the glowing magma inside the walls. "Salamander was working for me all along. I planted him with the crew of the Power Vulcan years ago. Getting caught by Janley on the beach, almost dying, pretending to be betrayed. It was all a part of my overly convoluted and incredibly time-consuming plan to destroy you." "Destroy me? But why? Why would you want to do that?" "You were becoming too much of a threat to my authority while you were part of my crew. And a threat to my authority means a threat to obtaining the orb. I needed you out of the picture. And that was when I began formulating my plan. We thought that you had died in the streets of hell all those years ago, but that too was part of my plan. I had planted agents everywhere, ultimately leading you to the Power Vulcan, and now you're doomed." "You mean to say you planned on reuniting with me here today only to reveal your betrayal?" "Precisely. I calculated all from the beginning." Tigana revealed a dagger he had concealed in his sleeve. "And now you die." He threw the dagger straight towards the Toymaker's head. But the Toymaker didn't move or even flinch. Instead, another gunshot reverberated through the chamber, and the dagger clanged to the floor, shot off course. The Toymaker still stood, with a stern frown on his face. "What the—" Tigana whirled around, only to see Coquillion with a raised gun in hand. "Coquillion, what is the meaning of this?" So now it is you who does not understand," said Coquillion, but his voice was now different. No longer was the voice of a bumbling fool of a first mate. No, this was the voice of a cold, calculating killer. "Is it not obvious that I, too, was an inside man?" "What?" "You thought that the Toymaker thought that you thought he died in the Straits, but you were wrong. He knew all along. In fact, your suspicions of him were not misplaced. He was indeed planning to overthrow you as captain of the Marco Polo. He confided in me in case anything would happen to him, and I allied with him. Too bad you also confided in me with your plan. I was working against you all along. Your plan was just a plan within the Toymaker's plan. In fact, my name isn't even Coquillion." He ripped off his head, revealing that he was actually wearing a mask this whole time. Underneath this guise was a human face. "It's Bennett! Now you die!" Tigana gasped. But before Bennett could shoot, he felt something cold on his neck. "Not so fast." "Salamander, what are you doing?" Bennett screamed in rage as he realized Salamander held him in a lock with a knife. Grunted Zaroff. "Good, Salamander," said Tigana. "Yes, indeed," said the Toymaker, walking over to Tigana's side. "You," shouted Bennett, "you were planning on betraying me all along." "That's right," replied the Toymaker. You thought that I was planning on overthrowing the captain, that he was afraid of me doing so, but that's only how he made it appear. Right, continued Tigana. The real threat to the Marco Polo was you, Quillian. You were simply too cunning and backstabbing for your own good. We had to find a way to get rid of you. So you staged an internal feud, faked each other's deaths, and led me here. Darn you! Darn the both of you! Bennett's face contorted and writhed in pure anger. Grunted Zaroff. Stop talking, Salamander commanded in a low, even voice. I still loved her, you monster, Bennett said under his breath. Suddenly he lashed out in anger. Dog, this is for killing Janley! With the quickness of years of experience, he unconcealed his concealed knife and attempted to stab Salamander in a last-ditch effort at survival, but to no avail. Before the knife even reached Salamander's flesh, Bennett was dead on the ground. Salamander put his knife away and brushed his hands together. Tigana stretched, relaxing now that all his enemies were dead. He again crossed to the pedestal upon which sat the Dalekenium Orb. He placed his hand on the orb once more, but before he could pick it up, he heard the cock of a gun. I can't let you do that, Tigana, said Salamander, now with the gun trained on Tigana. Salamander, you! But that must mean... Tigana's head spun around. Toymaker! That's right, said the Toymaker, who now also held a gun trained on Tigana. We both knew it would come to this. The world wasn't meant to have two masters of treachery. Only one of us will leave here alive. Grunted Zaroff. Salamander's mind was at work. He was concentrating and waiting for the Toymaker to utter the key phrase. He remembered what the Toymaker told him to do at this point in the plan. Yes, what he had been told so many years ago. When I say pirate scum, that's your cue to shoot Tigana. And so Salamander waited. He held his breath as the insults flew between the former shipmates, but the phrase never came. The Toymaker advanced on Tigana, forcing him back closer and closer to Salamander's position. Still, the phrase did not come. Salamander was beginning to grow scared. Tigana's back was right in front of him now. He had a clear shot, but he dared disobey the Toymaker's orders, however tempting it was to do so. Insults continued to fly, but then suddenly, Tigana turned around to face Salamander, who was frightened out of his wits at this point. Tigana pushed down the gun Salamander held outstretched in his trembling arms. This isn't according to plan, thought Salamander. This isn't according to plan at all. You're waiting, aren't you? Tigana whispered. Waiting for your master. Of course, he'd never betray you. You've been his faithful servant for years. Of course, he couldn't turn his back on you after all this time. Then he yelled, But what if he had turned his back before any of this ever began? Did you ever think of that? No, you didn't. Back to a whisper, he continued, moving his face up close towards Salamander's. You didn't think of that, and that makes you a fool, swine, trash, pirate scum. And it was the last thing Salamander ever heard as he was shot dead by his supposed master, the Toymaker, tears in his loathsome eyes as he fell to the ground. Grunted Zaroff. Tigana and the Toymaker shared a laugh, two friends who had overcome all obstacles after years of work. It worked. Our extravagantly convoluted plan to wipe out all of our enemies worked. Now the orb is ours for the taking, Tigana, the Toymaker said with glee. Yes, Tigana agreed. Neither of them seemed to notice the mad scientist in the corner. Tigana stepped up to the pedestal for the third and final time and placed his hand on the orb. Ready, friend? He asked. It's been many long years, but we finally have the orb in our grasp. And he lifted the orb. Suddenly there was a terrible rumbling, and the ground shook violently beneath their feet. What's that? The Toymaker gasped in horror as he struggled to keep his balance. Then they heard laughing. Vile laughing. It was then they both realized they'd forgotten to kill Zaroff. He stood on the perimeter of the circular room, and he seemed to be having no trouble keeping his balance. You fools! Zaroff shrieked in delight. You played right into my hands. I waited until you petty weaklings had settled your silly deceptions and disputes, but I knew it would come to this. How could you not know that the Dalekenium Orb spot on the pedestal is what keeps the Dalekenium dormant? How could you call yourself pirates. Then you don't even know that removing it would cause a planet-wide tremor, the likes of which nobody has ever seen. Ah, well, it is no matter. Now it is time to harness that power for myself. Zarf pulled a metal machine out of his cloak. Behold, my greatest invention, the magnitude harnesser. With this, the power of earthquakes and eruptions will be mine to control. Other planets will fear the name Zaroff, and I will rule the universe with an iron fist. When it pleases me to destroy a planet, I will do so. Ha ha! Zaroff continued to laugh hysterically as the ceiling started to cave in, trapping him underneath tons of rock before he could use his machine. His upper body was left uncovered, and the magnitude harnesser was only inches away from his outstretched hand. He grasped the machine with all his might, but to no effect. It was simply too far away, and he could not move. So close, he said, as more rocks came tumbling down from the ceiling and walls. Snapping back to reality, Dagana called out, "We've got to get out of here!" The Toymaker nodded. They dashed into the tunnels as fast as their legs could carry them, Dalekenium Orb in hand. Dagana wiped the sweat off his brow. That was close, Toymaker? He and the Toymaker had somehow made it out of the tunnels before a complete cave-in. Then they had defied all odds and made it back to the power Vulcan and escaped the furious erupting Dalekano as it spewed lava all around. They'd overcome tremendous waves as the planet-wide earthquake raged on. And now it seemed as if all calm had been restored as they sailed over gently rolling lava. Yes, indeed, said the Toymaker, holding up the orb, examining its radiant beauty as it sparkled in the harsh sunlight. But then something in the lava caught his eye. He went over to the side of the ship and looked down at the sea. What's that? He said, seeing something metal-looking floating in the lava. Dagana came over as well. Well, I'll be, he exclaimed. That's me old dishwashing machine. How did it survive all of that? A few minutes later, they had the machine pulled up on the deck. Of all the things on me ship, this made it through. Piece of junk hasn't worked in years. Dagana kicked to the side of the machine. Just then the machine started to shake slightly of its own accord and a nebulous form emerged from it. A form any respectable lava pirate would know from the children's storybooks and the legends of old. It was one of the ancient gods. Dagana and the Toymaker gasped, not sure what to do. The god yawned. At least it sounded like it did. It didn't really have a mouth. Or a body. Then it spoke in a surprisingly normal-sounding voice. Ah, what a nap. Hey, who are you? And wait, is that the Dalekenium Orb? Man, it's been a while since I've seen that piece of trash. Piece of trash? Yeah, a lot of lives lost over the years for it. And for what? Useless hunk of metal we gods forgot to destroy ages ago. Might as well finish what we started now that it's here. Here, let me see that. And before Dagana and the Toymaker could protest, the god shot a red lightning bolt out of its nebulous form, vaporizing the orb on contact. Dagana and the Toymaker stood speechless. Well, see you guys around, the god said, before flying off to who knows where. Now what? The Toymaker asked, his reason for living now only a quickly dissipating puff of smoke. Dagana put his hand on his chin. He was deep in thought. Well, isn't there anything else to search for? What do you mean? Well, the orb is gone, but there's still a wide, wild lavas to explore. There must be other treasure out there, and I think we ought to find it. We're pirates, after all. The Toymaker started to laugh, a full piratey laugh. Nodding in agreement, he went off to go man the controls, and the two set sail for more adventures. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Doing Dagana's voice probably has ruined my throat for the next week. I feel like it is on fire. But you know what? It was worth it. I regret absolutely nothing. So, hopefully, the plan is next week we will return with our retrospective with the Krynoid Podcast, Jim and Martin. They've been very accommodating with this whole situation, so thank you for that. And you can email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your fan fiction, which could be on the show. Check us out on YouTube at Trust Your Doctor. Check us out on iTunes at Trust Your Doctor. Leave a rating if you like the show. You can follow us on Facebook at Trust Your Doctor, Twitter at TYD Podcast. And I guess until next time, the end.